I call to order this meeting of the National School District Governing Board. Please stand and join me in the pledge of allegiance. Ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. In closed session, the board voted unanimously to approve a compromise agreement and released in OAH case number 2021100858. The agreement includes funds for special education services and fees in exchange for a waiver of claims against the district. I guess we should have roll call first. Okay, roll call.
Ms. Sala?
Present.
Ms. Gonzalez?
Present.
Ms. Gates?
Present.
Ms. Sarmiento?
Present.
Ms. Frenchco Castañeda is absent.
Public communications. The public communications provides the public with an opportunity to address the board regarding an item on the agenda or other topic. Anyone wishing to address the board shall submit a request for oral communications card. Cards are available near the entrance to the boardroom and are to be submitted to the recording secretary. A member of the public who wishes to address the board in any such matter is limited to 3 minutes for one matter, up to a maximum of 5 minutes for all matters. There shall be a limit of 20 minutes for any matter unless such time limit is waived by a majority vote of the board. Members of the public may not yield any time to other speakers. No board action can be taken. And I see that we have 2 requests to speak, beginning with Alfredo Alvarez. Oh, I'm sorry, we're gonna go to those when we come to item 15. Thank you. Okay, item 11A, to accept the agenda. Do I have a motion?
I move to accept the agenda.
Motion by Mrs. Dalla,
I'll second.
second by Ms. Gates. Please vote.
Ms. Dalla is listed as absent.
Thank you. Number 12, approve consent agenda / routine items of business. Oh, I'm sorry.
Did you say Ms. Bella's absent?
It was for a second.
No, it's right.
Oh. Item passes 4 yes, 1 absent.
Thank you. Number 12, to approve the consent agenda / routine items of business. All items listed under the consent agenda are considered routine and will be acted upon in one action by the board. It is understood that the superintendent has recommended approval for these items. There will be no discussion prior to the time the board votes on the motion unless members of the board, staff, or public request specific items to be discussed and are removed from the consent agenda. All items approved by the board will be deemed as considered in full and adopted as recommended. Number we're voting on the consent calendar. Do I have a motion to approve?
I motion to approve. I'll second.
Motion by Ms. Raga, second by Mrs. Dalla. If no discussion, please vote.
Item passes 4 yes, 1 absent.
Thank you. Under general functions, number 13A, we have an update discussion on the coronavirus pandemic. Dr. Brady.
Yes, good evening, Governing Board, Board Clerk Sarmiento and trustees. This is a standing board item that we used every single board meeting while our schools were shut down and in the process of reopening. But when we reopened for full in-person instruction, we sunset this agenda item because most of the restrictions and mandates had been sunsetted with the governor's reopening plan. Tonight, we're here to share with you a COVID-19 update because one remaining mandate from the state has been the universal masking mandate for schools. I'm here tonight with the executive cabinet. We also have our nurse supervisor from Rady Children's Hospital, Ashley Palmer, and they would be happy to answer any questions the board has as we move through this presentation. This is really intended to give you a little bit of background on where we are, present you with a recommendation, and to engage you in a discussion as to next steps. So we would like to take direction from the board as to how we proceed with responding to the mandates that are the release of the mandates from the state level. So the new guidance that was announced last week by the governor is that on March 11th, masks will no longer be required in a school setting. However, the California Department of Public Health is strongly recommending that masks remain in school. So with these two somewhat similar but somewhat opposed pieces of guidance, we have been consulting with Rady Children's Hospital. We've been looking at the San Diego Health and Human Services Agency guidance as well as Cal OSHA. The San Diego Health and Human Services Agency as well as Cal OSHA align with the recommendation from the California Department of Public Health that masks remain strongly recommended in school. Again, not mandated, but strongly recommended. So we decided to take a look at our local indicators to see what this might mean for a national school district. And the first thing we did was we looked at the risk in our community. So the CDC has put out a document that you can look up your local community and you can see if you are at high or low risk. When I sent the letter to families last week, you might recall, we were listed in the high risk of community transmission here in San Diego. By the time I got home, I had looked it up again and we were already listed as low within the same day. We also know that in San Diego, that is an average for the entire county. And we have some pockets of San Diego where there's very low risk. In other areas like South County, we do have a higher risk of transmission still in our zip code. Then we looked at some potential exposure settings. And you can see from this chart that school and daycare are one of the lowest sectors or lowest areas or indicators for transmitting COVID. But that is a place where we have had masks until this point. Other places like households and community gatherings are higher risk of transmission, and we know those are areas where a lot of people engage in those activities without a mask. Most people aren't wearing their mask in their home. And so we think this data is reflective of mask wearing. We also looked at COVID cases, and you can see from this only has from November through January, but the case numbers were pretty low until we hit those holidays. Coming back from the holidays, we saw that huge spike, and now the case numbers are decreasing once again, anticipated to be more in line with the line that you see from November to December. And this is COVID cases in children in San Diego. In National School District, we have also been tracking our COVID case rates. These are on our website for anybody who would like to look at our data by day, by school. And these are only representative of COVID cases that were known to be on campus while infected. So it doesn't include any students who were tested at home maybe over the holidays, didn't come back to school, and their parents kept them home. It's only if they had been on our campuses while infected. You can see from, this is all the way back from July, all the way through December, our case rates were very similar to what we saw in the San Diego chart on the previous slide. But then in January, we had a huge spike. We still had almost double the cases in February. Now we're seeing our cases too, just like in San Diego, even out, and they're more in line with what we saw from July through December. Just a quick note, we did have only 143 total cases from July to December, and we had 175 cases in January alone after the holidays. And so we only came back on January 11th. We didn't even have a full month. So coming back from the break, we did see quite a big spike. And from the pie graph, you can see 65% of all of our cases this year were in January and February alone. Again, we don't have March numbers represented because we're still within the month. They are on our website up to date. And we are seeing that they're tapering off again and are more in line with what we saw in the fall. And then the last piece of local indicators that we looked at were vaccinations by age group. And you can see from this chart that the age group we serve, ages 5 to 11, has still the lowest percentage of people that are vaccinated. So all of these were things that we considered in terms of data indicators, and we discussed these with our Rades Health team. We also put in the letter that I sent out to families, and we've been talking with our staffs and coffee chats and state of the districts, opening it up for conversation. We have been soliciting input, and we invited everybody in that letter that went to both staff and families to come here tonight and speak to the governing board if they had a strong opinion on this matter. Or they could email me directly at superintendent@nsd.us. And some people just emailed a few sentences, some took time to email quite a bit. And I wanted to share with you an excerpt from every one of those emails. And there's only 4 slides, but I think it's representative of the comments that we're also hearing when we're talking with staff and with parents during those meetings. So I tried to just take some of the salient points from each of the emails that I got and to underline them and bold them so that you could draw your attention to some of the main ideas of what they were saying within their communications. If it's in blue, these are people that said, no more masks. enough's enough. And on this slide, you can see that people were saying things like masks, we want parents to be able to make the choice. Masks are harmful to students' development and socialization and their ability to communicate. A lot of teachers say, I have to ask the students to repeat themselves over and over again. I can't understand them. Some of our teachers told us that it was difficult to complete formal testing assessments while wearing a mask. Some believed that strongly that it was a person's choice, whether it be an adult or a child. And some, again, did not want them to, under any circumstances to continue wearing the mask. And you can see this is a parent, a teacher, and another parent. We got some other comments where they said, no, we still want the mask. So we have on here 2 parents that wrote to me saying that they really feel that the mask help reduce the transmission of illnesses between children. And without masks, it may be difficult to protect children most at risk, including children that have not been vaccinated. So again, they're in red, they're saying keep the masks. We had some more blue, get rid of the masks. Personal choice, feeling like the masks mandate has going to have an everlasting effect on students. Some felt that the long hours were not healthy. And again, people feeling it's a parent's choice. And then some more that said, keep them on. And in here, they're trying to, teachers are saying we're trying to combat learning loss. If you take the masks off and we have another spike, kids will be out longer and we won't be able to have that continuity of learning. For those in testing grades, teachers are worried that we're going into testing and kids could be transmitting COVID. And then I did not want to summarize for a parent or translate for a parent, so I did include the parent that emailed us in Spanish. Just again, wanting to continue to use the masks in schools, especially in the closed-in areas. So not necessarily on the playground, but definitely in the closed areas. And then these are the last of the comments, and these were get rid of the masks again. And again, teachers saying it's really difficult to see the nuances in language, especially for English learners. One teacher told us they felt that it was hindering the interpersonal connections, human expression, airflow, had concerns about being sanitary, being wasteful, perpetuating fear. And then some feeling that masks were holding kids back. So we definitely have input on both sides. We have data on both sides, and we had to come up with tonight a recommendation for the board. So knowing that the governing board in the National School District has been very cautious throughout this pandemic, has made decisions with safety at the forefront, we have kind of gone through many different iterations of the next slide. I'm going to show you what you have in front of you. But in the end, we did ask our Rady Health team, Ashley, to weigh in and really help us with our thinking to make sure that it was medically sound and not just reflective of the opinions or changing data. So what we decided in the end was to make this recommendation for a phased approach that we feel leaves a bit of conservativeness to it as we move toward the end of the year. So there's a lot of data and research that indicates that masks outside are not necessary. Many school districts have been without masks outside since the start of the school year, and that is not where they're seeing a lot of the transmission of COVID. So our recommendation would be to remove the masks outside as early as next Monday. That would give us a week before the spring break to kind of, and half days, to kind of see how it goes, to see if students still wore their masks, to see how many people are going to still opt for that option, to see if we had any spikes in our transmission of COVID, and then the students would go into spring break. Coming out of spring break, looking back at our data, we're concerned about those spikes coming back from break. So our recommendation is to keep masks on indoors through that first week back from spring break. So even though the guidance from the state says after March 11th, you don't have to keep them on, we would keep them on through the week indoor up until spring break plus a week after spring break. And then following that, starting on April 11th, we would then make it a discretionary mandate or discretionary for the adults, either the principal or the teacher, to require masks at any time they felt that it was necessary. And I'll give you a few examples. For example, a principal might say, we would love to have a special assembly in the multipurpose room. Everybody is going to sit in close quarters in a big, large group. They might say, for this, we're going to ask that everybody have their mask. So everybody would come to that assembly and wear their mask per the requirement of the principal. In a classroom, a teacher may say, okay, you're sitting at your desk, so it's okay to take off your mask, you're working on your computer. Oh, boys and girls, we're going to come sit on the carpet. And coming to the carpet may require students to sit shoulder to shoulder, close proximity, turn and talk to your partner. And at that time, the teacher may say, for this activity, we're going to use our masks. So building in a mask culture, much like we see adults do, hey, I'm going into the grocery store, I don't have to wear a mask, but it's a good idea to wear a mask in a public grocery store. We put our masks on if we choose to. So this would be where the teachers would decide how risky is the transmission in this particular activity. Maybe the teacher knows that several students are out sick, maybe even know a known case of COVID in their classroom. They could say, for the next few days, we're going to be wearing masks in the classroom. And it would be part of our culture, and it would be discretionary, but required by our professionals that are working with our students on a daily basis. So that is our recommendation, but we definitely take our direction from the board. We'd love to answer any of your questions to help inform our thinking. And then I have promised the community that I will be following up with a letter by Friday to let them know what our direction is. So after they know that we're talking to you tonight and that it might change from what our recommendation is, and then we'll be presenting the final recommendation on Friday in a letter. So I'd like to invite Ashley over to the podium and of course our executive cabinet and turn it back to the board for any questions you have. And Ms. Palmer has her mask on because the health sector still needs to wear their mask.
Any questions from the board?
Oh, I weighed in on a lot of this recommendation in consultation with Dr. Brady, looking at what we've done down here in National up until this point, as well as what other school districts have done and what they've seen. As Dr. Brady mentioned, we have been more conservative down here, and I think that's reflective in our cases remaining low. And even when we had our spike, in comparison to some of the other districts, it was not the magnitude that some of them saw. So the thought of removing the masks outdoors now is reflective of the fact that other districts have been able to do that without seeing an associated increase in their cases. And also then giving us time to make sure that the removal of masks, both in schools, for the schools that are remaining still in session while we start our spring break a week early, and in the general community, now that there's mask mandates removed for vaccinated and unvaccinated individuals, we will have some extra time to assess if we are seeing anything major change in San Diego County. And then we're still in a position of not having to take a giant step forward only to have to walk that giant step back. It gives us smaller steps to get us to where we need to be, while still being cognizant that COVID is still out there. Let's see what's happening in the community before we move to this approach of allowing it to be at the discretion of the adult leaders in those areas. It also lets those teachers weigh in on their particular students and what their health status might be. Like she mentioned, there could be students out sick, but you could also know that you have students that are more high risk should they get COVID, and choose to ask the students to mask more frequently when they come together than in other classrooms. So I think this reflects a lot of what the concerns that we saw from the community on both sides of doing things in a safe and well thought out manner, while also recognizing that we are entering a new phase of COVID, and it is going to be endemic. It's going to be around. It's not going away. How do we live with that, but how do we transition to that safely?
apologize, I did forget to mention one thing. You see in the top corner, preschool will continue with the universal masking because those students are not eligible for vaccines, and that is in line with our federal Head Start mandate.
Thank you. Ms. Gates?
I will say that as a classroom teacher, hearing students sometimes is just impossible. I'm fortunate in that I do have a microphone to be able to amplify myself, but there are some students I simply have to go, like, I can start out at the front of the room, and by the time I've asked them for the fourth time what they said to respect their input, I've had to go back and stand next to them and lean down because, some people are quiet, and the masks sure do make that more difficult. And yet, I appreciate very much the transitional phase at coming up till April 11th. We continuously see this spike. So this is a pattern that we, wisdom says we have to acknowledge that when we get time off, we don't sit at home by ourselves hoping we don't get COVID. We actually go and enjoy being with people. And so acknowledging that and yet at the same time trying to find a reasonable way forward with that small group indoor setting. Or if I'm working, I'm working at my computer, I'm over by myself and I can breathe, I can take my mask off and that's okay. We're not going to make everybody happy. Then that is just what we have to acknowledge, but honestly, thank you for not missing that 2-week after period. It's really important. 175 spike from 22 in January. That's huge information for us to pay attention to. So thank you.
And I'll let you know that I do continue to work with the county during school breaks while everybody's off. I am still taking case reports and I'm still monitoring and working with Leticia or Dr. Grady to monitor, did we have cases in school that last week before spring break? Hey, we still want to let people know if they were exposed. So it's not as though we're just going to take 2 weeks and come back and say, hey, what's happened the last 2 weeks? I will continue to be looking at those cases, and should we see any kind of concerning trends, it does give us that opportunity to put brakes on if that's what we need to do. Hoping that we don't, but it's a way to, as I said, move forward in an intentional way so that you're not faced with moving backwards.
And for me, it was a third of my class out for the first 2 weeks following our return from winter break. So a third of the class is a huge chunk. Yeah.
Yes,
button. Yeah, it's just, I like the idea of the transitioning part as for that, especially with children, but I would like to see, what other considerations, like, we've been doing regardless about hand washing, for example, or after break or before meals. So I would like to see more enforcement on that and what else is that we're gonna take on that part. Especially on the younger ages. I think the older grades are more like mindful about it, but the little ones need to be reinforced constantly. And we don't have to forget about component of hygienization of the hands. This is a fun component of the contagious part.
I agree. I said since the beginning that there are some things I do hope we continue to carry with us post-pandemic, and one of those things is the focus on hand hygiene, respiratory etiquette, and staying home when you're sick. We will continue to follow the county's decision tree as far as sending kids home with symptoms to whatever degree they are requiring us to, because we really want the kids to be home getting better when they're sick, not in the classroom, and continuing to emphasize the importance of hand washing, covering coughs and sneezes, but more than anything, keeping sick kids home. Those are some things I really hope that we carry forward with us, lessons learned that are good, whether you're in a pandemic or not.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for remarking our point, because we all touch our faces. We all have itchiness, and it's going to happen, mask or no mask. So, and even removing it, we can touch the mask with saliva on the mask, and that creates an issue before approaching to another one. So it's gonna matter of just touching the mask, removing it, touching it, and somebody else may take over the laptop or tablet, or maybe the desk. It can be any type of focusing on, that can be crapping just a small piece of trace of COVID, and that creates a case. So that's gonna be, and just to keep in mind about the reinforcement of that hygiene, practices from everybody, not only for the kids,
Just to,
everybody's included.
yeah, just to speak to that, they really don't see the transmission from COVID on surfaces. It's more the respiratory droplets, right? Like I'm standing next to you and I'm talking, but in my talking, I'm creating small droplets in the air, and that's really where the COVID source is. It's not so much transmitted, like I just type here and I'm going over here, now you're typing after me. That's really not the transmission. It's the aerosolized respiratory particles where you're spreading it. So yes, there is consideration about cleaning and things like that, but that's not the source of the transmission.
Okay, yeah, thank you for clarifying that part.
So I have a question. So these recommendations, Dr. Brady, I understand that we are, as a school district, we need to have something in place that everyone can follow, is that correct? I agree with your recommendation. My only question is, what are we going to do if parents advise their children don't wear the mask at all, no matter what?
Yeah, so we don't have to have anything in place. The mask mandate would end if we didn't put something in place, and then students could show up without their masks. So the guidance we're asking is, since the state said we could put additional restrictions and make it a tighter, could we then put our own restrictions in place? And so this is reflective of being a little bit more conservative than what the state is telling us to do. So we'll still do the same thing as if they were to violate the state mask mandate. If they were to be deliberate and not wear their mask when they're being asked to wear their mask, we would follow it in the same way we would do it. We would have done it up until this point. So those are usually handled by the teacher first and then by the principal. And we have been very lucky. Our students have been very good about wearing the masks, and we haven't really had any cases that I know of, and maybe Dr. Kraft could speak to it, because I have not heard of any defiance for masks from either adults or students. One thing that we would be emphasizing in the letter to parents is that it is still optional for students, and that they may wear their mask the entire time if they so choose. And so we think having this discretionary time where masks are going on and coming off, and having that culture of masking, will also not separate our students and our adults who want to continue to wear their mask, so that everybody's wearing their mask at least at some point.
And that would be forever, right?
All the way through the end of the year, when it becomes an endemic, and moving forward, we may say we're not going to reinforce it, but forever you could wear your mask to school. Correct. And I think that's going to be part, unfortunately, of our culture for at least the near future.
Any other questions? Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
With that, we're moving on to item 14A, under Ed Services, adopt resolution 21-22.19, declaring the week of April 11th through April 15th, 2022 as the week of the young child.
I move to adopt a resolution declaring the week of April 11th through the 15th as week of the young child.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I second the motion.
We have a motion made by Mrs. Dallas, second by Mrs. Lizarraga. Please vote.
Item passes 4 yes, 1 absent.
Thank you. Item 14B, amend contract CT 3756 between the National School District and the Neighborhood House Association Early Childhood Education Programs for the 2021-22 fiscal year. With the pleasure of the board.
I move to amend contract CT 3756.
I'll second that.
Thank you. I have a motion made by Mrs. Dallas, second by Ms. Gates. Please vote.
Madam President, 4 yes, 1 absent.
Under item 15, Human Resources, 15A, approve agreement CT 3924 with the San Diego County Office of Education to provide an induction program to beginning teachers. Do I have a motion?
I move to approve agreement CT 3924.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Yes, please. I'll second that.
Thank you. We have a motion by Ms. Dallas, second by Ms. Gates. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, please vote.
Madam President, 4 yes, 1 absent.
Thank you. And under item 15B, adopt resolution 21-22.21 of intention to eliminate / reduce classified unfilled / vacant positions due to lack of work and or lack of funds. And I have two requests to speak, one being Alfredo Alvarez. Come on up to the microphone.
Thank you, board members, for allowing me to speak today during public comment. And so, what I'd like to share with the governing board is I'd like to respectfully encourage the board to decline this resolution to eliminate these positions. And so, under this resolution, the second and third whereas reads, whereas the district does not currently have nor does it anticipate the need to fill positions, whereas leaving these leaving these positions unfilled has not impacted district operations or the wages, hours, or other terms and conditions of employment for other classified positions. However, I think it's important that I mention that currently right now, even though these positions are currently vacant, our members have been sharing their voice with the union, and this is what I'm trying to convey to the board now, is that our members have been feeling workload issues. So CSCA will be asserting its right, if this board resolution passes, to negotiate impacts and effects of these eliminations of these positions. And so currently what I'm looking at is we have 14 campus student supervisors, 5 child and student service assistants, 7 transportation student attendants, and 1 assistant buyer storekeeper. And so as a representative of CSCA, I do believe that these are very important positions. And I say that they're really important to the students and to the families that they're part of. And I really want to convey that when we have these 14 vacant positions, these are eyes that are two eyes per person that are on the students, making sure that they're behaving appropriately. Since the pandemic, it's been reported to me that there's been a lot of issues with behaviors. What is it because the children were sheltered in place for so long, the mitigation of learning loss. I think we're all trying to get back on track right now, but I think if we really want to stay on track, we really need these eyes, these mandated reporters to be at work to support students. And we also have 5 child nutrition service assistant positions that are currently vacant. And so I have the privilege to be in communication with members who are part of the CNS department. And so that means there's less hands that are there to bag up lunches, to prepare meals, to be the smiling face that the students are used to seeing. And then also when it comes to the transportation student attendance, I'm really concerned about not just these jobs, but the students who are special needs students and oftentimes need those services to help them as they're being transported. The bus driver can't, leave the steering wheel to go, to go tell the students to calm down or to behave themselves or help them with their medical needs.
Can you wrap up your comments?
Yes, absolutely. And I apologize for going overboard. So basically, when we have a car, we have 4 wheels. It's not a good idea to drive it with 3. Just trying to bring a little levity to the matter. Thank you.
It's appreciated. Next, we have Mona Rabada.
Hello, my name is Mona Rabada. I am the chapter president for National 206. I'm here tonight to speak of this adoption resolution for elimination, reduce classified unfilled vacant positions due to lack of work and lack of funds. I'm really here. Alfredo covered all of the positions, but I'm gonna speak for CNS. In 2007, we had a drastic restructuring in our department. And when that restructuring hit, I have a board member here that was with us when we were going through that, and it was really hard times. A lot of the hours that were cut from the 4-hour positions and they lost their benefits and everything, a lot of them said that partially we weren't going to be scooping and assembling, sandwiches and doing the work that we are doing today. And with that, we just came full mode to open up our salad bars again, to go normal, to regular. And what we're finding out is there is a lot of work where the people are, having to stay maybe a little over a minute or two, trying to get those dishes washed because there's more dishes. Right now, people are feeling like they're octopuses because these hands are missing, and it hurts me because I've been here with that big, strong reduction that we had. And how much more people are we going to lose? We're still feeding the same. We go through the same motion. We order the same. We receive the same. We still have to lift the same. And to lose these people, it's really a hardship on our bodies, on our health, on everything. We're here to do the best job for you. We do whatever it takes. You asked us to feed the community hundreds of thousands of pounds. We pushed, pulled, carried. We were there. And all of a sudden we come back and we're treated like this. I feel like I got slapped in the face. I understand that we have to do what we have to do. But what I don't understand is not having the hands and the feet and the thinking and the eyes and everything that we need to run an operation. What really hurts me is last week, our last board meeting, from what I gather, you guys approved the RD position that's getting paid out of the CNS department. However, that position won't be working full-time with us, but they're getting rid of 5 classified people positions to pay the RD position. That's going to go help the school district of lack of work and lack of funds. That's a joke. I'm really disappointed that I think we went a little backwards. I think this should have came first, and then the position should have came to you all. But I'm here to speak for the people, and I'm here to do what is right. And I love to do what I do, and I love the children, and I love all of you. And that's why I'm being very candid, I'm being very humble, but I am the strong voice. And tonight, I really wish you really think about approving this resolution, because it's gonna hurt us. It's gonna hurt all of us. It's gonna hurt us. I feel like a pandemic is coming in the CNS department again.
Thank you. Is there any discussion?
Yes.
Mrs. Ellis?
I understand that this is always a very difficult thing for us to speak about and to act on, because it's people, but in this case, there aren't any people in these positions. Our district is going through some very tough times. Right now, we have one-time money, but that's not going to be there later on. And later on, we're going to have to either do it now or do it later, but it's not, we're down to the wire now. We have to start, cutting our budget. Is what it comes down to. And like I said, it's always very difficult to do this. But I think it's a necessary thing for us to do at the moment. And I know that our district has always been very good at keeping or trying not to cut positions and cut people. And with the enrollment that we have, I know that if our enrollment was to increase, that we would put these positions right back. But at the moment, I think it's a necessary thing that we need to do, unfortunately.
Thank you. Mrs. Gates?
I'm curious as to the why for the different ones, because this is like a blanket statement, right? Due to lack of work, or lack of funds, or lack of applicants, or lack of, please do, because I'd like to have a better understanding of why we're saying this. Because I agree, what, like, the comment about, campus student supervisors, having eyes on during recesses is always a handful. And so, I'm sure that somebody has told us at some point that there's a certain number of people, a certain number of adults to student ratio for that. And yet, the moment that adult is pulled because somebody fell and hurt their knee and we're writing a nurse's slip, that's just double the number of kids who are having to be watched by another person. And so all of those pieces that go in, I need a why before I do anything with this.
Thank you. Dr. Hernandez?
So under Ed Code 45308, you actually don't have to bring a resolution forward. The reason why we brought a resolution forward is so that we could be as transparent as possible. But Ed Code 4538 is really for layoffs when you're actually noticing people, actual people. These are positions that are vacant and have been vacant. And the reason how Ms. Gates or Board Member Gates is asking me, how do we decide on these specific positions? So, for example, we do have a ratio of campus student supervisors accordingly. It's really, we go about an average 1 per 100 students. That's been kind of the ratio that we have come up with. Currently, all of our schools are operating, we want them operating at a higher ratio than that. So what we looked at was enrollment. And as you know, our schools have dropped enrollment immensely. So where our schools were at one time 500 and above, now many of our schools are no longer 500 and above, which really correlates to us not needing as many campus student supervisors physically on campus. So before, when we used to have 4 first grade classes, now we're down to, in some schools, 1.5 to 2. And so right there and then, it's less children to supervise. And that's one of the reasons for our campus student supervisors. Our CNS assistants, they do heavy lifting, heavy work. We know that, and we appreciate all the work that they've done. Unfortunately, that loss of enrollment also means we are feeding less children. And so at some schools, in the breakfast, it's dropped to a 50%. So at that point, they have to look at how many children are we feeding? And so that was the decision, was to drop the 5, which would be at different schools, of course, because we aren't feeding the same amount of students that we were once feeding before. If our enrollment rose and we found the need, then of course we would up that to that need that needed. The assistant buyer storekeeper as well, that was a position that remained vacant. And we are now finding that at this point, we are not going to hire anybody at this point. And our transportation student attendant positions, there is some confusion with that specific position because it's not necessarily for our special education students. Past practice at this district has been that we had transportation student attendants for all our buses, whether they had students with disabilities or not. We are finding that at this point, if we do need to put instructional assistants on the bus, then we will do that if they need that for that purpose. But overall, not all districts have transportation student attendants for just general education students. So we are position that not every single school district holds. So when we looked at those positions, we looked at also vacancy, and through all the districts, not just our CSEA positions, we have looked at the budget reduction through attrition, and this is what we're doing right now for this. For example, our administration pool, in 2019, we lost our program specialist. We have never rehired. The coordinator of student support services remained unfilled for over a year. We also did not fill our principal for a year as well at Rancho, and we doubled up to save funds. We've also we didn't fill our assistant superintendent of business services for a year and a half. We looked at those positions as well and thought, okay, where can we save funding during that time? So we took on, all of us in administration took on added duties in order to support those positions being unfilled. We're also not going to post for our vice principals or assistant principals. We've lost one, we did not rehire, and Ms. Berenger has stated she's going to retire, and we are not going to rehire again. So we are doing it through attrition. As well, we've also, through attrition, have lost 21 teachers since June 2021 until now, and none have been rehired. The only positions that have been hired for certificated classroom positions have been our special ed. So we are committed to not rehiring through the attrition process, and we're seeing it all over, not just in specific CSEA. The reason why we're bringing this resolution forward, like I said, is because we want it to be as transparent as possible. Where the other certificated positions, you can just drop them through attrition. They don't need a specific resolution unless they are attached to a person.
Yeah, thank you. The question was also mine, so thank you for answering that one. But I have another concern, another question, can those numbers be reduced? The 14, 3571. That is reduced, or how we come up with those numbers?
Those numbers are the ones that are vacant right now. So that's how I came up with those numbers. Those are the vacant positions. In child nutrition services, there's actually 7 positions vacant. And we are saying that for 5 for sure, we would not rehire, but we still have the extra 2 for the campus student supervisors. We're saying the 14, as well as the transportation student attendants, we're saying 7 because those are the vacant positions. If you choose a board, another number to recommend, then that would be the pleasure of the board. But these are the numbers that we're recommending only because they are vacant currently right now.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional discussion? Yes, Dr. Brady.
Yeah, so I just wanted to add a couple additional points to what Dr. Hernandez was saying. Specifically for the campus student supervisors, the legal ratio is 1 to 1 supervisor for every 125 students. So we try to keep ours at the most 1 to 100. So we're already hiring more staff because we do believe that the more eyes and somebody's pulled away, those are real things that happen. And Dr. Hernandez met with every single principal. They looked at revising the schedules to make sure that our campus student supervisors weren't trying to supervise really large areas. So really targeting the area where kids could play to make sure that they could help each other in that supervision. So we have been, and when they have a particularly large area at a school, we've also given more assistance to those schools, even if it's not within the ratio. So we're not making decisions only on paper, but also looking at the unique layouts of every single school and the needs of every single school. The special education hubs, for example, tend to be staffed a little higher than our other schools. The other thing I wanted to add is that these recommendations tonight are in line with, and the decision to not fill these positions are in line with the Budget Reduction Task Force recommendations and the recommendations made by the fiscal advisor, Michelle McClary. When we brought that forward and it was not approved, our Budget Reduction Task Force, our Budget Reduction Plan, we worked then with the Budget Reduction Task Force, and these are in line with the decisions that were made then to not fill those positions. So we have made a concerted effort to not fill those positions when they became vacant. But again, like Dr. Hernandez said, we want to be transparent. We want to give our partners in CSCA an opportunity to bargain with us those impacts and effects, because we know that it's not that easy to just say, oh, this position isn't needed. The work, as Mona was saying, still is there in many ways. You know, and how do we restructure, redistribute the work to make sure it's doable with the declining revenue that we're getting because of the fewer students that we have in our district moving forward. So we are committed to, you know, meeting with our partners and looking at how do we redistribute work, how do we look at, you know, creatively at supervision and support in various areas where we know we need to reduce positions. We don't want them to be people, but to make sure that the work gets done, and what can we take off of our plates if we can't do the work with less staff.
Any further discussion? I guess we didn't have a motion on that. Thank you. Can I have a motion?
Yes, I will move to adopt resolution 21-22.21.
Thank you. Do you have a second? And I'll second that for the vote. If no further discussion, please vote.
Item failed, 2 no, 2 yes, 1 absent.
Thank you. Under item 16, business services, 16A, the report and approval of the positive certification of budget revisions for the second period interim financial report as of January 31st, 2022. Mr. Abernathy.
Good evening, Mark. So I do have my binder. If you have your binder with you, I might refer to some pages in it. So tonight I'm going to be presenting the second interim update. Second interim is an update of our budget as of January 31st, 2022. It also includes the actual expenditures that we've experienced through that period, meaning the cash that has been paid out from our bank accounts. Just a general overview of what the state economy looks like. You wouldn't know it from listening to the news, but the state's economy is doing really well. The state puts out something that's called a finance bulletin. As of February 2022, taxes across all three of the major income taxes, personal income, sales and use tax, and corporate taxes, are up, except for sales and use tax. Sales and use tax is kind of a harbinger for the future. It's usually something you pay when you buy something like an RV or a boat. So usually that's disposable income. So as disposable income goes down, that tax amount goes down. So kind of seeing that play out in February. Corporate taxes, of course, are much higher than projected. And these are actual tax collections. These aren't projections from the state. This is the cash that's come into the state. So the state has plenty of money. It's just a matter of how they decide to allocate that to school districts. So you've heard about our declining enrollment. What I'm showing here, again, I've shown this pretty much every presentation I've done for our budget. The dramatic decline in our enrollment, and you can see it's not stopping. Even though the amount may have stopped in the future years, the percentage of decline in enrollment may be slowing, but the decline we saw between 2021 and 21-22 is dramatic, to say the least. 14% is what we could expect to lose in funding based on current law next fiscal year. So we have to work with 14% less revenue next fiscal year, according to current law. We don't project a decline in the following fiscal year, so the second year out from this year, but we do see a decline again in the fourth year out. And I'll talk about how that's going to impact our bottom line. So there is proposed legislation to change how school districts are funded next year to kind of blunt the impact of declining enrollment. The governor has proposed funding school districts based on a 3-year rolling average rather than what we are currently experiencing, or the current law is, which is getting funded on the current or last fiscal year ADA, whichever is higher, you will get funded at that. So a 3-year rolling average, what does that mean for us? You don't see the current fiscal year here because it won't have an impact in current year. This starts next fiscal year. This is our ending fund balance for our general fund. With the current law, 4 years out, we will be basically insolvent, and we would have to make up nearly $5 million in expenses. So we anticipate having at least spending at least $5 million more than we actually have. If the law passes as is proposed by the governor, then we would actually have surpluses that are higher than our current projections for the next 2 fiscal years. But again, that fourth year out, 1.7 million is what we anticipate having in our ending fund balance, which would be below what we're required to, which our normal 3% fluctuates, but it generally comes out to somewhere between 2.4 to 2.5 million dollars. So we would be below that, which means we would have to find reductions to make up the difference. We would be qualified, meaning we wouldn't be able to make our future obligations. So 1.7 million, even if the law passes, we still need to find reductions in that for that fourth year out. This isn't part of the current second interim because the second interim doesn't go out into the fourth year. But when we bring our budget for our next fiscal year, it will be part of that. So sooner than later, we have to start identifying reductions to make up that difference. So our budget projected year totals for Fund 1. This is a summary, which includes a summary of expenditures and revenues and our ending fund balance and assignments. If you go to tab 4 in the folder on page 2, this gives more details. Basically, what we're looking at is what the budget looked like when we adopted it versus our adjustments as of second interim, and the budget as of January 31st, 2022. So the second interim budget and the differences, the adjustments in the middle. Many of the differences in revenue are federal revenues and pandemic monies. So as we had more information, we started actually budgeting for those. Before we adopted the budget, we didn't have that information, so we just were not able to include that in the budget. A lot of that is restricted spending or restricted revenues. Expenditures also, those included changes in terms of bargaining agreements, the actual changes in health and welfare costs, changes in our operating costs as well. As many of you have experienced, our utility bills have gone up. Gas costs are going up, so we have to make sure we account for those. Materials costs are going up. You name it, the cost is going up, and that's if we can even find it. So that is becoming a problem.
Mr. Avenessian, I'm having trouble following along. You mentioned audit adjustments, but from on page 2, what I'm looking at, it says 0, 0 across the board. So what am I missing here?
They're not actually audit adjustments. They're internal budget transactions.
So where is that listed?
So
You mentioned adjustments, that was the only adjustment I saw. Okay.
So tab 4, page 2, actually all of the pages basically. So it gives even more detail on where those adjustments are. So the first column is our original budget, which is what the first column here is. And the adjustments would be the board approved operating budget. So all the items we brought to the board from the period that the budget was adopted till now, that the board has taken action on, are included in here. And that was part of also like the first interim where we made budget adjustments. We received more revenue information. We made those adjustments and the board adopted them. Actuals to date, so that's column C on the SACS report. Actuals to date are the cash transactions. Those aren't budget transactions, so anything that's actually occurred. Projected year totals is what second interim is. That's our projection for the fiscal year. So those adjustments are between what we're looking at right now is through the original budget and the projected year totals to come up with exact differences for each of those object codes or resources. We could look at that, but that kind of detail isn't in the SACS reports. We could actually pull those in our budget transactions.
Can I just jump in real quick? So where it says combined, that's restricted and unrestricted, so it breaks it down. So when you look up at the top, in the SAC software, a lot of the pages look the same. So for combined, you're looking for unrestricted / restricted, and that's where you'll find that information, and that's tab 4.
Yeah, tab 4 is all general fund expenditures.
Yeah, that's what I'm on, tab 4, page 2, right?
Correct. So looking at this for our current fiscal year, we're projecting to end the year with a 23% reserve. That's the current fiscal year. We are required to have $2.5 million in reserve. So that's 3% of all of our expenditures. So you notice that changed from when we adopted the budget at 2.2 million. As expenditures go up, so does our reserve requirement because it's 30% of our total expenditures, regardless of where that expenditure is. So it's unrestricted and restricted combined. We have to be able to have at least 3% of that covered in our ending fund balance.
So you're saying that what we're spending on COVID, all of that is because that's an expenditure, even though it's a one-time expenditure, that has to go into our reserve too, based on 3%?
Correct. The state has to take legislative action to exclude resources from our reserve requirement, and they seldom do. Again, some of the changes in our second interim from when we adopted LCAP fund, local control accountability plan funds have increased by 2.1 million, and that's due to the change in the law from our supplemental concentration being funded by 65% versus what it was at 50%. Federal revenues have increased by 7.5 million, and federal revenues are recognized in our budget when they're spent. So we have to earn those revenues before we can book them in our books. So $7.5 million of federal revenues are included in the budget, which weren't originally because we can't, basically. Accounting rules don't allow us to. Increase in employee costs, that's 1.2 million. That included any of the agreements we had with our bargaining units, benefit increases, positions that are filled, vacant. We do all that work to come out with the bottom line total. Increase in books, supplies, services, and capital outlay, $4.7 million increase. And that, again, a lot of that federal revenue, the $7.5 million, that was part of COVID spending, those one-time funds. That 4.7 million, much of that went towards COVID-related items like testing or masks or PPE, you name it. That's a part of the increase as well. So again, this is a combined look at our general fund, restricted and unrestricted. So ending fund balance assignments When you have an ending fund, that exceeds the statutory requirement of 3%, you're required to assign those. Right now, we have assignments that are done by administration, but come the budget, the board will have to take action to assign these funds. It will no longer be a choice of the administration. It would be something that the board takes action on, and that's because of a change in ed code. So what we're looking at is $5.2 million in LCAP carryover. Much of that carryover is a result of being able to fund existing positions through our pandemic monies. So a lot of those funds were freed up in the LCAP for other purposes, and it's a matter of planning on how we spend those funds in our LCAP. It's not necessarily going to the bottom line, so to speak. It's still LCAP expenditures. Curriculum adoption, we're looking at about $6.5 million for science and social studies adoption. It may look like a lot, but curriculum adoptions are not what they used to be. Now we have a physical book, a digital book, manipulatives, and you're purchasing things throughout the life of this curriculum. It's no longer you buy it and forget it. It's throughout the life of the curriculum we purchase things. So I anticipate that cost to go up, to be honest. Other post-employment benefits trust implementation. This is something that we've discussed in the past. We want to start funding our OPEB costs. That's health and welfare insurance for retirees. Right now, what we do is we pay out of our general fund dollar for dollar. So there's $100 of expense. It comes out of our operating expenditures. If we have an OPEB, which is a trust, that could eventually generate enough revenue to pay for those costs and sort of wean it off of our operating expenditures. We hope to have that set up soon. We want to plan on it to adopt it in our budget. So you will see that in our budget. Custodial support and materials due to COVID. Again, it's hard to predict how much materials we'll need for COVID reasons. That includes increased sanitation, spraying devices, masks, PPE. So we always want to make sure we don't run out of funds or we have to dip into our ending fund balance to pay for those. Facilities and ground improvements, it's almost $1 million. We have needs throughout the district for facilities, and these aren't needs that you see in plain sight. We have a lot of plumbing needs. We have a lot of things like shade that we require, things that really, because of climate change, because just of age, the district didn't need HVAC 20 years ago. There's more temperate climate here, but now we do need HVACs. There's needs that we just are starting to see. Things are, we're kind of putting Band-Aids on them, roofs or our plumbing. We have almost a plumbing issue every day on our school site. So these are needs that developer fees, for instance, do not pay for. Developer fees are to mitigate increasing enrollment or to rehab or to change the school, not for ongoing maintenance. So we have to find the funds to fund our ongoing maintenance. And part of that is through assigning this $1 million. Protection against future revenue loss. We know we're losing revenue in the future. We know kids our enrollment is declining. We have assigned $443,000 to help cushion that impact. It's nowhere near enough, as you saw earlier, but it is something to help. And local control accountability plan concentration grant. This is $2 million, again, that we will have to look into putting into our LCAP plan for the future years. It's part of that. It's part of that change from 50 to 65%. $2 million is a specific amount that we haven't discussed. That $5.2 million is the other part of the LCAP that we haven't spent. So those positions that went to the pandemic money, Those are those positions. $2 million is brand new money for this year. That's money that we have to plan on how we spend. I did a presentation the last time on how much pandemic money we have, how much LCAP money we have. Part of that was to make public how much the district is receiving. We will need to plan on how we spend this money in the future through our LCAP. Okay, our MYP, our multi-year projections, this is what the district is graded on in terms of our fiscal health by the county and the state. You'll find our MYP on tab 16. What you see in the slide is a combined general fund, meaning our unrestricted and restricted spending for general fund. That's the last 2 pages of tab 16. MYP is our current year and our next 2 fiscal years. Basically, the requirement for our MYP to have a positive certification is that we have at least 3% reserve in all 3 years. So as you can see, the last fiscal year, 23-24, we have a 3.91% reserve. So we are just above the requirement to qualify as positive. If we were below that, we would not be positive. We would be a qualified school district, meaning we would self-certify as qualified unless we identify reductions in our budget for future years, and we could substantiate that to the county. Because if we submit a qualified budget to the county, they want to know how are we going to address that in the future. Right now, we don't have to do that just because we are above that 3% threshold. But the margin of error is really small. 3.91%, it's not much in terms of, by the time we close our books, that is going to change significantly. But right now, as we project it, we're looking at having only 3.91% reserve in that 3rd year out. As you saw earlier, that 4th year, we'll actually have insolvency. The red box, you'll notice, is our deficit spending, our projected deficit spending for the next 2 fiscal years. Current fiscal year, we're looking at actually having an operating surplus, meaning we're spending less than we are receiving. But you'll notice the next 2 fiscal years, our total revenues are reduced considerably. So currently we have total revenues of 84 million. Next fiscal year, we're projecting 72 million. In the following year, which would reflect a rebound in average daily attendance, would be 74 million. But our total expenditures are not changing. We have fixed costs. About 85 to 90% of our costs are just employees. So there's very few places we could look at for reductions. So we have to budget for positions. We have to budget for people. We cannot assume that people will not be in positions. So those expenditures don't really change. We're looking at $83 million this fiscal year. It increases next fiscal year due to the cost of living adjustment, due to CPI, which is inflation as it's applied to goods and services. Those we are assuming will increase next 2 fiscal years. Again, that 3rd year out, total expenditures do drop a little, and that's because of one-time spending. A lot of that pandemic money, the deadlines are coming into that 22-23 fiscal year. We won't see that money in that 23-24 fiscal year. Beginning fund balance and ending fund balance, you'll notice for the next 2 fiscal years, they do. If you're overspending, you have to account for that somehow, and that is through our ending fund balance, our savings, so to speak. So the ending fund balance does drop considerably the next 2 fiscal years, and our assignments are reduced as well. And again, we're looking at 3.91% in that 3rd year out. Some things we've done to try and address our deficit spending and try to get ahead of future reductions. We do have a budget committee forum. We meet regularly. We discuss, what the budget looks like. We try to educate the committee on unrestricted funds, restricted funds, what are we allowed to spend money on? We try to answer any kind of questions the committee may have. We want to make sure everyone is as educated on the budget as possible, just to be as transparent as we can be, but also have a better understanding of what the numbers mean. We're looking at plans in depth, so when I bring a plan to the board, I take that to the committee as well, and we take a long time discussing it, going through it. Any kind of presentation I receive from school services, I take that to the committee as well. The next step we're looking at is staffing ratios for our school sites. Certificated staffing ratios are pretty much in our contract, so we must follow those, but we don't really have any staffing ratios for classified staff. So we want to take a look at that. I found something that was maybe 20 years ago, but has not been followed. So maybe a look at updating that and having a standard throughout the district for staffing ratios. Again, we've utilized one-time funds for existing positions. We haven't laid off anyone. We haven't, no one's lost their job. We've tried to fund people with the money we have. We haven't added any positions to burden the general fund, so to speak. But, you know, those are one-time funds. The life of those funds will end after next fiscal year. And we do have past reduction plans. Part of the reduction in force for classified was part of the past reduction plans. We try to offer as much services as enrollment dictates. So, you know, part of that was projecting what services will be needed based on what we projected enrollment would be. But no one projected enrollment to be as low as it would be this fiscal year versus from what we saw in the past. Hopefully it's an anomaly and maybe enrollment will rebound, but we can't plan on hope. We have to plan our budget based on what the realities are. And we plan this budget in consultation with the county because sometimes when there's the governor's proposals, some counties may allow you to use that for your projections, but our county was strict in the sense that we have to use what the law is for our projections. So I just wanted to show the board what it would look like if the law changed. This is just an overview of our other funds. So Fund 8, that's a new fund for this fiscal year. That's all the money that's raised by ASBs. It used to be a part of general fund. Now it's separated and has its own fund. Child Development Fund, that's our preschool fund. Cafeteria Special Revenue Fund, that is our nutrition services fund. Our building fund is our bond fund, so any kind of general bond obligations that we issue, the funds go into that. Fund 25 is our developer fee fund. Again, developer fees have to go towards mitigating the impact of increasing enrollment or enrollment at schools based on construction. Fund 35, we hope to spend that through the remaining fiscal year and close that out. There's no funds going into that. It no longer is really an active fund in terms of revenue. Special reserve, we're spending that down as well. That is going to projects throughout the district for facilities needs. And Fund 62 is Integrity Charter Schools ending fund balance, 6.7 million. A bright spot is cash flows are positive. We have paid off all of our borrowing from last year for cash flow purposes. We will not need to borrow for next fiscal year unless something happens between now and the time that government adopts a budget. Same thing we saw last year. Last May, they came out and said we would have to borrow. But assuming things stay the same, the government is well funded. They will not issue IOUs, which means our cash flow will be positive. We won't have to borrow to make it through cash. Our next steps, we will submit this report to the county for review and confirmation. Because we self-certify this report, we are saying we believe this is our certification. The county is going to look at our assumptions and confirm that, yes, your assumptions are correct. We are starting to work on the budget for next fiscal year. We'll present that to the board in early June and then adopt it in late June. And then the next big report from the government is the May budget revise from Gavin Newsom, our governor. It'll work on revising the budget that he put out in January. Again, it's a projection for the governor on how he wants to see the state spend its money. It won't be law until the government adopts it, and that's usually in late June, which is too late to incorporate in our budget. So our budget will most likely reflect what the May revision is that's released from the governor. And school services hosts a workshop that's based off of the May revise, and we'll get that information to the board if they're interested in attending that. And it's normally in person, but they've made the option of virtual workshops available. So school services has that virtually. We'll make that available if the board wants to attend. And I just want to thank our business department. None of this, just an unbelievable amount of work that goes behind generating these reports accurately. Everyone in the department plays a role in it, and I just want to acknowledge and thank them. That's my presentation.
Any comments, discussion?
I have a question.
Yes, Mrs. Dallas.
What do you do with the recommendations from the budget reduction committee during this budget?
Really, the committee right now, we're not looking for recommendations on, in the past, it's been like a budget task force to recommend reductions. Right now, what it is looking at how we operate. Maybe in the future, we'll get to that point where we could bring recommendations from the committee to the board to look at. But right now, it's really to look at the budget, like a holistic view of the budget, to make sure everyone understands what the budget is, what is in the budget, how we come up with our figures. And they recommend things to study. So we had a recommendation on, can you give us more information on how we could spend title monies? So that's something that we researched, we brought to the group. This is how title monies are allocated, and this is what's allowable expenses. So right now, we're not looking at, black and white recommendations on a budget from the committee. It's really a learning committee right now, and then in the future, if it goes to that point to recommend changes in our budget, then we will be discussing that before we actually make that a mandate of the committee.
Thank you, Dr. Brady.
Yeah, I'd just like to clarify that the former budget reduction task force, we did bring a budget reduction plan reflective of those recommendations. Mr. Albanese, one of his first presentations he did, he brought that plan forward and that was approved by the board. So if at that time, those positions, if they're vacant, then get removed from the budget. If there are people in the budget, we hold on to them and down the road, we have them as not in the budget. So we would have to bring them from layoff or add them back to the budget. So we add them back to the budget, that would change those bottom lines on the multi-year projection. But they are currently, the ones that were vacant and the ones that were approved by the board are not in the budget in those out years in the numbers you're looking at. So those are with those positions already removed. So again, if they get added back in, if they get hired and filled, and get added back into the budget, you'll see those numbers change.
Any further discussion? Thank you for your report. 16B, adopt resolution 21-22.20, authorizing National School District to accept the Cal-Shape grant. I'm sorry. I have motion?
Move to approve the positive certification of budget revisions for second period.
Thank you. We have a motion by Mrs. Yates, do I have a second?
I second the motion.
Second by Ms. Lazzaro.
Adam Fox is for yes, one absent.
Sixteen B, adopt resolution 21-20, authorizing National School District to accept the CalShape grant. Mr. Avenatti.
Thank you. This is a resolution that will authorize the district to enter into this grant with CalShape, which is through the state agency that is handling it, which is I can't recall the agency right now. But basically what it is it's paying for ventilation work, assessing our ventilation throughout the district, making sure the HVACs that we have installed are working appropriately. Also, it will install CO2 monitors throughout the district. This is all paid through the grant. These are things that we actually will be required to do. The grant itself was done, the application was done through the same vendor that installed our HVAC systems, Jackson and Blanc. There was no cost to do the grant application, but the way this works is they applied on behalf of the district, and if this grant is approved, then the grant money will go to the district, and then Jackson Blanc will bring an agreement to the district for the work, and then we will pay for that work through the grant. So basically, this money is intended for our school sites only as well. It does not include the district office or the preschool center. It's only meant for school sites, only for classrooms, only for school sites that serve K-12 students. And for us, the $800,000 would be for all 10 sites.
I understood this, that we're accepting the 800,000 already. Is that true?
Correct. That is our award, basically through the work that Jackson Blanc did for all of our assessments. That's their assumption for how much it will cost to do all the work.
Okay, I just thought you said if we get it.
If the board accepts it.
Oh, okay.
No further discussion, please vote. We do not have a motion. I'm sorry.
I will move to adopt resolution 21-22.20.
Thank you, Mr. Della. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
I have a motion by Mr. Della, second by Ms. Yates. Please vote.
Adam Fox is for yes.
Okay, and 16C to accept donations. Mr. Avenatti.
Just a regular procedural to accept donations to the school district.
Do I have a motion to accept?
I'll move to accept donations.
And I second the motion.
Motion by Ms. Yates, second by Mrs. Raga. Please vote.
Adam Fox is for yes, one absent.
And Board and Cabinet Communications, Mrs. Della.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I just want to wish everyone a good night. Thank you.
Mrs. Raga.
Yeah, thank you. I want to give a shout out to the security staff for the year for Veronica Garcia, which is a great asset coming out of Kimball. I know she's outstandingly doing well in Harbison, and congratulations, Mrs. Garcia. And I also want to shout out to our new principal at Kimball, which is really outstanding, managing of the staff, and I was so happy to have a good feedback from the parents and from the students. Are really excited to have a principal on board now. So, other than that, thank you very much. Have a great night, everyone.
Thank you, Mrs. Yates.
Report cards. I think I saw friends and teachers have wrapped those up, so, right? So I trust everyone has had good luck on wrapping up report cards if you're a teacher and on receiving them if you're a student. So, and I also am glad that we acknowledge, we could be the young child. For me, Teacher Sharon, Miss Rosie, and Miss Alader are three of the people who have spoken clearly into my own children's life and shaped who they are as learners, as friends, just as decent people. So I'm glad that we set that moment aside. We have 7 days of school, and then students and teachers will be on spring break. And our classified staff and administration will keep on trucking. But good luck to everyone as those days come.
Thank you. Mr. Evanasian.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank our warehouse. Our warehouse has been really just incredible in this last year with the added work in terms of all the PPE they've been required to deliver and order. And it's just like they haven't skipped a beat. Just the other day, a school site called and said, can we get some toner? The vendor is having issues delivering our toner, and the warehouse was on it to get school site toner. So I just want to acknowledge the work that they do and thank them for all the hard work that they do. And they always have a smile on their face every time I see them. So if you have a chance, please let them know how much we appreciate them. Thank you.
That's because you have a smile. Dr. Hernandez.
Thank you.
Yes, I just want to wish all of our staff, in the next couple of weeks, they'll have a 2-week break, and I hope they have a nice, relaxing break, and everyone a good night.
Thank you. Dr. Pratt.
I'd like to thank and celebrate Miss Lawson and her team, and I'm super excited to see the amazing Week of the Child that they do every year. If you haven't had the opportunity, you should go and visit and participate. You will feel like you're a child again. And I'd like to thank all the school site, the leadership, the teachers, the classified staff. They're all getting together in order to celebrate students' performances and conferences this week. And I know it's a lot of work, and I thank them for the work they are doing. And then lastly, I just wanted everyone to know that we will be opening our online registration on March 28th for re-registration as well as new registration. We are working with their school site staff to finalize last minute logistics, and we will have that open for a few months so that we can prepare for next year. March 28th.
Thank you.
Well, this is always my favorite time of the year. As we head into spring break, we have so many celebrations ahead. So, of course, we already said congratulations to our classified of the year, Ms. Veronica Garcia, because we do submit the names to the county for hopes that they are recognized at the county and state level as well. Soon we'll be announcing our certificated employee of the year as well. We finished filming the English version of our Then and Now exhibit, so that's going to be rolled out after spring break, and we are currently working with Kimball School students to film the Spanish dual immersion, Spanish version of the Then and Now exhibit. So we're really getting close, and we have locked in a date with the library for May 19th. So if you can mark your calendars for May 19th after school, I believe it's going to be from 4 to 5:30. And the library is going to host a reception for all of the students and their families. And then their videos with the exhibit will be on display at the local library. We'll also be having to travel from school to school before then. So if you can't make it on that day, you can definitely see it at one of our schools. We'll give you the schedule. I also want to just say that when our kids get back from spring break, several of our 6th grade classes at schools will be going to camp. We're really excited that they're going to be able to participate that. All of our schools will be going with National School District schools to camp. Dr. Kraft has put together a testing with our testing partners so that the students can be tested with PCR tests before going to camp. And Mr. John Hanson also went down to the county today and got enough free rapid test kits to send home to all students before the break. So when our students come back, they can test before coming back to school. So lots of great things in motion, and I just am very thankful for the teamwork, not only from the staff, but also from the board. So thank you.
Thank you. I'd just like to add that I was thankful to participate in the Read Across America. I went to Commonwealth last week and was able to read to Ms. Laquata's fifth, sixth grade gate class, as well as Mrs. Eagle's kindergarten classes. And I had made arrangements for our chief of police, Chief Jose Teos, to come and read, but he was called away, had last minute things, but he did go today to make up that time because he knew he had better. So he was able to come in and read to Mrs. Eagle's kindergarten class. The kids were thrilled. They were so excited. He gave them the little stickers, the badges, police badges, as well as pencils with the National City Police Department. I've never seen kids so excited over getting a pencil. It was so cool. And that's all I have to report. With that, meeting adjourned. Exactly.